Summer on the homestead means early mornings in the garden working to stay on top of our rapidly growing harvest and trying to beat the heat. Each morning brings a new crop to harvest. We search through the cucumbers to find this perfect size for pickling, and we hunt and pick the ripening red tomatoes for sauces and stews. It's always fun to look for the biggest tomato on the vine. And of course, pulling weeds as we go along. We've had a decent sized crop of peppers this year. Our pepper plants are actually very full and colorful and sometimes have some spicy peppers on them. Some of the plants are weighed down with too many peppers, which means it's time to harvest and preserve those peppers, which can be easier said than done. Our family actually doesn't eat a lot of peppers, but there are a few dishes and a few canning recipes that we need peppers for each year. So you'll often see that I freeze peppers or freeze dry my peppers to preserve them because it makes it easier to throw into a dinner recipe later on. But today we are making one of our favorite recipes to can, which is pepper jelly. It is a wonderful treat we have on our pantry shelf, and our kids really enjoy it. We especially love it during the holiday season to serve with cream cheese and crackers. It's also a really great gift to give to neighbors and friends and even teachers. This recipe is super simple, and I will leave a link down in the description so you can go grab the recipe for yourself, as well as a link to the video tutorial so you can follow along and make the entire recipe yourself. But the recipe starts by cutting and deseeding all of our peppers. And I use a combination of jalapeno peppers as well as regular green peppers or red peppers or yellow peppers or whatever peppers I have on hand. The more jalapenos you use, the spicier it'll be, especially if you can get some of those red jalapenos. I use a food processor to chop those peppers down really fine, and then I add them to a stock pot along with some apple cider vinegar and get those cooking down. And then I'll add in some of my pectin, whether I use solid or liquid kind of depends, and I'll cook that down until it's bubbly, and then I'll add in my sugar. Once that sugar and that pectin solution are well combined, I bring it back to a boil for another minute until it starts to kind of harden up, and then they're ready for my jars. I like to use half pint jars or less for my jams and my jellies. This is because we like to put them in our farm stand as well as give them as gifts. So these little jars here hold about a half a cup of pepper jelly, which makes them perfect for putting in the farm stand or giving as gifts. Once all the jars have been cleaned, the rims are clean, I'll add my lids and then I'll add on my rings. It's really important, especially with jams and jellies, because of the sugar and how sticky it is, that you get those rims of the jars really clean, or else they will not seal correctly in the canning process. And then you still have jam, but it's not preserved and can't sit on the shelf. You just have to put it in your fridge and use it as soon as you can. So once those are all ready to go, I'll put them in my water bath canner, and I have a lot of jars. So I'm stacking them, and you'll see in one of my video photos here that they're kind of all over the place because they don't stack very well because they're so tiny. But it still works out as long as everybody is got the lid up. They'll be water bath can for 10 minutes. Now this time around, I made my life a little bit easier and I printed labels so they can go right on my jars and I don't have to do anything. It's so nice having this little printer that it's been a real great addition to our homestead. And once those jam jars have sat in that water bath canner for 10 minutes, I'll pull them out, put them on the countertop on a towel, and they are ready to go. Even though we did some canning, homestead life doesn't stop there. Now it's time to go through the crop that we picked today, pulling out all the good tomatoes, sorting the peppers, seeing what we have for ourselves as well as what we can put in our farm stand. Because it's so hot, we'll also check on our chickens, making sure they have plenty of water and food and that they're nice and happy. We have an entire new flock of baby chicks that are growing rapidly, and we want to make sure that they survive through the fall and the winter. Dinner is up next, and because we have a good crop of peppers this year, we're having one of our favorites, which is pepper steak. Pepper steak is one that we've been eating for almost our entire marriage, and it is, like I said, my husband's absolute favorite. We start out with a couple of sirloin steaks, and I slice them into thin slices. This is our preference as a family. For this recipe, I learned it where you cut them into 1-inch chunks and saute and fry them up, but that is actually not our preference. So for this specific recipe, I like to slice them into thin 1/8 slices and then put them in the frying pan and brown them up. Next, I'll go to my pantry and pull out one of the onions that we harvested in early summer. They are still pretty wet, and so I'll probably have tears in this recipe. They're just really potent, but they're so good. And then we'll go through our peppers. I have some of these yellow peppers that are actually pretty white this year for some reason, but they have a lot of flavor. So I'm putting some of these yellow peppers in the dish today, as well as a green pepper. And if I'm feeling a little spicy, we'll add a jalapeno as well. But these I'll cut up into slices as well. I like to kind of julienne them up. I have done it where I've done it in 1-inch, like chop them into 1-inch pieces, but I just prefer to kind of have these thin, nice thin julienne slices of peppers for this particular recipe. Once all of my peppers and onions are cut up, I just leave them on my cutting board here, and I will chop up a clove or two of garlic. This is one of the recipes that I make probably once a month. Um, and so it's one that's kind of, I know off the top of my head pretty well. But this is some of the garlic that we grew this year. I will admit it's not quite as potent as I would like, but I'm hoping with a little bit more dry time, we'll start seeing a little bit more of the flavor of that garlic. But now all of this meat is nice and brown, and we're pulling it out of the skillet. We're going to leave all the yummy browning on the bottom of that skillet because it's going to add a lot of flavor to our sauce that this recipe is going to make. So next to that skillet, I'm adding the garlic, and I'm just going to let that brown up a little bit and get a little bit of flavor. And then I have a jar of fresh chicken broth. This is one of the staples that I have in my pantry all the time. I save all of my bones from any of our recipes that we make with chicken and beef as well, and put them in the freezer. And when I have enough, as well as some vegetable scraps, I'll throw them in the crock pot and make a batch or two of chicken broth. And then I can can it and put it on my shelf. So I've done that a lot this year, and I'll have kind of my process that I'll share with you as well down in the description. So we're just taking that garlic and that broth and we're letting it cook and pick up the brown pieces from the beef that are at the bottom. Now for this recipe, you could use beef broth. I personally use chicken. Either one works. It's just what flavor you prefer. I'll flavor it up with some salt and pepper, and I actually add a little bit of soy sauce to it as well. Give it a little bit of salt and a little flavor. And once that kind of cooks down, I added my onions, but now I'm going to add a slurry of cornstarch and water. This will thicken up that gravy that we're making, that sauce, And once it's thickened up, we're going to add our beef back to it. Now we'll mix all those ingredients together. Just kind of get that back to a little simmer, and then we put the lid on it. We're going to cook this for about 20 to 30 minutes, just cooking it down, letting those onions have a chance to cook. Then we'll open it back up. I have a few stragglers here of onions, and add our peppers on top. And then we're going to allow that to cook another 10 minutes. And once everything is cooked down, you have this delicious pepper steak recipe that you can serve over rice. With the day done, it's time for a sunset walk, some fun in the ditch, and a beautiful view of the silo. Homestead life may not always be perfect, but it sure is worth it.